Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. We have an exceptional episode for you today. My guest is Mitch Duckler. Without mincing words, Mitch is a brand mastermind. He is a renowned brand strategy consultant with 35 years of expertise, and his book, The Future Ready Brand, is a must-read. Join Mitch and me as we talk about the significance of brand positioning and corporate purpose. We'll unpack how companies like Accenture achieve success with a purpose-driven approach, and we'll explore the exciting role of AI and technology in branding. Get ready to discover the keys to becoming future ready. And don't forget to check out the most recent issue of the StrategyCast newsletter on StrategyCast.com. Just like this episode, it's full of inspiration and a ton of ideas that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I am so excited to have Mitch Duckler join the show today, who is with Full Surge and has a new book out called The Future Ready Brand. You can imagine what we're going to dive into, The Future Ready Brand. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you, Laurie. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, I tell you, it's so nice to be with you. I'm so excited to talk about really what we do as marketers, as CEOs, as CMOs to make sure that a brand is future ready. Before we get there, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and oh my goodness, some of these huge brands that you've worked with.
Sure. Yeah, so I have about 35 years of experience now in the area of brand and marketing strategy. And it's a bit of a mix between client side and consulting. So I started my career on the client side in brand management with Unilever and Coca-Cola. But the last 25 years or so consulting, but on those exact same topics of brand strategy. So that includes brand positioning, brand architecture, brand extension and growth strategy, et cetera. The last 12 years have been with the firm I founded, Full Surge.
Yeah, that's great. The book, The Future Ready Brand, How the World's Most Influential CMOs Are Navigating Societal Forces and Emerging Technologies, was released earlier this year. And I'm really intrigued by this concept of a future-ready brand. So way back when you were with the Unilevers and Coca-Colas, were they having discussions about what their brand would look like 35 years later? Or were they just in the trenches, taking things day by day?
I think is more the latter, to be honest, because I think it was just a less disruptive time. So I left the corporate world in the late 1990s, which was just on the dawn of the internet and digital transformation, the beginning of digital transformation. So I just think times were less disruptive then than they are now. And yeah, certainly we were looking a few years out, 5 years out, let's say, and talking about a 5-year growth strategy. But I don't think it was anticipating the type of change that we've seen since and are seeing once again now on a similar scale.
Yeah, I would agree. I've been at this the same number of years you have, and preparing for not, 5 years downstream, but tomorrow and 10 years downstream is just a totally different discussion that we're having today. At what point did you want to bring this idea of the future ready brand to the market? Was there a catalyst of something that you were seeing happening time and time and time again? Or was it just, part of your repertoire when it comes to strategic development to make sure brands are embracing this?
I wouldn't say there was a point in time, a specific event, but just gradually over time, as I've been working with clients, I've been noticing this confluence of both societal and technological trends that almost all of my clients are grappling with in some way, shape, or form. So on the societal, and this really forms the basis for the book, on the societal, there are three trends in particular. One is, transparency and purpose, which is nothing new, by the way. That's been around for a while, but I think it's becoming even more impactful and shifting as well. A second one around changing attitudes towards health and wellness, especially post-COVID, that is impacting brands that don't even necessarily consider themselves to be in the health and wellness space. And then third is the emergence of Gen Z. And their unique profile, how they are different from the previous generations. So all my clients in some way, shape, or form are kind of dealing with those changes. And then at the same time, we've got these technologies which are very, very disruptive and transformative in a good way, right? Things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics, extended reality, Web3 and blockchain. So it was just a lot of change, right, that everyone is kind of grappling with. And some of that, and there's a lot of overlap between them. So I thought, hey, why not write a book? And because I'm not necessarily an expert on, in particular, the technologies, I thought I would talk to CMOs directly and find out from them what they think about these trends and these technologies in particular and how they're dealing with them. So I interviewed 43 CMOs, mostly Fortune 500, and learned a whole lot from them.
Mm-hmm. How would you specifically define for our listeners what a future-ready brand is? We know what the components are, but in one sentence, how do you know if you're future-ready?
Well, I think it's, in terms of being future ready, I think the keys are on the technology side and realizing how they are changing the art and science of brand building. So what I think, and we can talk more about this, like when we talk about AI, but AI in particular is changing how brands are segmenting and then hyper-personalizing their offer in their experience, right? That we're able to be a lot more personalized and targeted than ever before through AI and its accompanying capabilities. And then I think also on the XR front, right, augmented and virtual reality is making the experiences themselves much more immersive and dynamic. So I think to answer your question, ask yourself those questions as a marketer, right? Are you able to personalize your offer to a greater extent? Are you offering more immersive experiences? And to the extent you can answer yes to that, you are more likely than not future ready.
Yeah, I love that. And as simple as it sounds, it can be very, very complex for companies to really, how much tech is enough tech, is a big discussion that a lot of companies are having right now. And none of this can happen without having the purpose and the brand strategy really honed in on, and something that can, technology can help catapult. In the book, you talk about the importance of positioning, personalizing, and promotion. So it's interesting that you bring all of that up, because a lot of that, if we're thinking about brand strategy and the purpose of a brand, the positioning of that is very, very important. And in the book, you talk about future waves when it comes to positioning. Hone in on that a bit for us, if you would.
Yeah, I think, and again, as I mentioned earlier, purpose isn't a new concept. It's been around for a while, but what I've seen is it's becoming, ever more central to brands and what they stand for. And some of those purposes are changing and expanding. So I do think it has, the whole notion of purpose, and it doesn't mean that you have to define your brand by it, but the whole notion of purpose is really weaving its way into brand building in a pretty profound way. And I don't see it going away. In fact, if anything, I see it intensifying, given the importance of purpose to Gen Z and them being, the primary generational cohort.
Right. It's so interesting. There's this rub between brand purpose and the positioning that you achieve through that. and technology, because a lot of companies are allowing technology to deliver brand purpose without a lot of human interaction. Think about chat. And it's this difficult area of really creating a strong foundation that a lot of companies are struggling with. And what technology takes over, what could be human, driven at the same time. What advice do you have for those brands and those CMOs that are sitting down discussing this very thing?
Well, I think there's a couple of things here that you're talking about. One is like regarding the purpose itself. I think it's really critical that it be really true and genuine to who you are, especially if you're going to actually define your brand by it. So, in the book, I talk about different levels of purpose, and at the core level, the foundational level, you as a brand can have a CSR. And that's fine. A CSR campaign is absolutely fine, right? It's all well and good, but you kind of stop there. The next step up is you can actually be a purpose-driven company,
Mhm.
meaning that it's really in your DNA. It's why you get up in the morning and go to work. Everybody embraces it, et cetera, right? That's a lot more committed. And then it's yet another step above to define your master brand by that purpose, right?
Right.
And when you do that, I think the stakes are really high. And not that they aren't in the other two scenarios, but you are defining the very face of your company and your brand and your offer by that purpose, right? So it needs to be genuine. It needs to be genuine also in the way you activate it. So to your point, when you look to actually activate your purpose, if you do kind of outsource, if you will, to technology, it's really critical to make sure that it is delivered on brand. I mean, that's important regardless if your brand is purpose-based or not, but I think especially when there's this intersection of your corporate purpose and your brand positioning.
Yeah. What's an example of a brand or a company that is doing that very, very well right now?
Um, I think one of the best examples that I've seen is, and they were interviewed and they're actually a case in the book, is Accenture. So they are one, and then in the interview, Jill Kramer, who's their CMO, talked me through the process, but they started with defining their purpose. And they then took it, they actually went one step further and said, we are actually going to define our master brand, the Accenture brand. So they identified their purpose and defined the purpose as to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity.
Mm.
And it's a very powerful purpose, as you can imagine. Every word, it's a 10-word promise, but purpose, but every single word has meaning in there.
Right.
And then they took it a step further and said, we are going to position our brand around it too. And they identified a campaign and a platform called Let There Be Change, right? And as Jill talked about, everybody, all their clients are dealing with change. They're either trying to cope with it or they're trying to affect change in some way, right?
Right.
And that is very consistent with their purpose of delivering on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. So I thought it was a really interesting example of how three things: purpose, business strategy, and brand positioning all come together under this one common platform. And as we talked, the purpose, you made clear, the purpose doesn't change, right? That is going to remain the same and enduring for the foreseeable future. But their brand positioning has the ability to flex,
Right.
still within and consistent with the purpose, but it has to be by definition a little bit more versatile
Yeah.
and agile so you can change and remain relevant over time.
I love that example and the meat behind choosing those words. And quite often, what we see is that, the sea of sameness sets in with a lot of purpose and positioning, even positioning statements. People, I think, confuse those two a lot. But for instance, how many times have you driven down a highway and seen a truck that says your success is our satisfaction? I mean, dozens upon dozens of leaders are out there with that same tagline, really thinking that it is going to be the purpose of the company. It might be true, but at least choose different words if you want that to be your purpose. Provide us some insight on just everything I've just said about sea of sameness and truly getting something that you can hang your hat on that is unique and different and creates distinction at the end of the day.
Well, if it's going to be purpose driven, and one of the things I do talk about in the chapter on purpose in the book, there are really, and this isn't my IP to be totally upfront. It's actually from a Harvard Business Review article that I refer to in the book. But there's really three sources of purpose: culture, competence, and cause. So, to your point, that slogan that you just rattled off, I'm not sure it necessarily fits into any one of those three. I'm not criticizing the slogan, although I do think it's kind of generic, but it's fine, but I wouldn't call it a purpose, right? A purpose is your culture. So that is the way you do business.
Yeah.
So Mars has a purpose that is culture inspired, and they're the company Mars, and that is the world we want tomorrow starts with the way we do business today. They have a very specific culture and the way of doing things, and internally, and the way they relate with customers and partners and so forth. There's competence, right? Competence is about what you do well, what you do better than anyone else. So the great example there is Walmart, saving people money so they can live better.
Right.
Arguably, certainly nobody in the retail space is better positioned and has more competence in that area, right? So that is a purpose that they can actually deliver on. I also talked to Abbott, the chief marketing officer of Abbott, and she talked about life to the fullest.
Yeah.
And how health is not, and their products, so they're largely in health tech and med tech. Mm-hmm. How those actually enable you to live life to the fullest. They're a means to an end. Those are examples of purposes, not just slogans like, your satisfaction is our aspiration.
Yeah. I love, as you were saying that, I love Kaiser Thrive, one word, thrive. Yeah. And and obviously I remember it because I'm a mom of four. I'm running a business and it's one word, right? And so the key there is shorter. Sometimes I think can be more memorable as well. But in the case of the consultancy that you talked about very early on, there's 5, 6, 7 words there, but the way that they push it out is so simplistic. It makes it more memorable.
Yeah, and she talked a lot in the interview about what went into each of the words, and so she talked about the notion of deliver, right, which is core to who they are, and the results oriented focus that they maintain. And then she talked a lot about technology and human ingenuity, and they had a lot of internal debate around which one goes first. Is it the human ingenuity that inspires technology, or the other way around? And at the end of the day, they decided it doesn't matter, right? It's just two opposite sides of a pole. So, to your point,
that's the big AI debate that's out there right now, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's a microcosm. Yeah, and to your point, short. I agree. Shorter is better. And I think actually the shorter it is, the more you really need to dwell down on and debate every single word, and make sure it is clearly defined and understood and deserving of being in your purpose.
Yeah, I love that. You talk about, regarding customer engagement experience, you talk about meeting customers where and why they are. How can brands create a more multi-sensory, engaging, and relevant customer experience?
So I think it's really the combination of those two technologies that I mentioned earlier that are enabling that to happen. So AI and extended reality, I think, are really facilitating that. So AI in particular, I think what AI, along with other things like zero and first party data, they're enabling brands to personalize offers and experiences to a greater extent than ever before. So, when I started in brand management, we would segment the market. So we didn't have a one size fits all, right? And we might have a consumer segmentation schema with 6 segments, right? That were different based on attitudes, behaviors, et cetera. Now with AI, and again, just access to first and zero party data, you're able to, your computing power enables you to personalize almost to the one-to-one, right? Certainly, I talked to a number of CMOs in my interviews who said we have literally thousands of segments that just are subtly different from one another, but we're able to actually change our offer to them, give a slightly different experience, and communicate with them differently based on the different combinations of those variables. So I think that is really increasing the relevance, right? It's not one to many, it's not even, one to several hundred thousand, based on 6 different segments. It's getting down close to 1 to 1. And that's pretty profound
What
in
do
my
you
mind.
agree?
And
It
then
is.
the reality, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
And then the extended reality piece, again, I think that's when you think about augmented reality, and a lot of the CMOs I talk to, especially in the product space, the retail space, they're using augmented reality to change the experience in store, at retail, in very exciting ways, right? Layering technology um, over in a real life menu, or allowing you to understand what furniture might look like in your home, or what cosmetics might look like actually on your face without having to try them on. Those are just really much more dynamic and engaging and immersive experiences than we've ever had before.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, and I like to shop a lot, so I like all those. It's a lot. Um, AI is such a hot topic. I love it. We've embraced it. We've had an AI council at the agency now for, at least 18 months. And it's the big discussion out there, and it should be. What do you feel are some of the top challenges that CMOs and marketers in general are facing right now surrounding AI?
The top challenges, I think there are a number. And it really, AI is such a broad space. And I think the challenges that marketers are facing differ by how they're applying artificial intelligence. But I would say there were at least 3 challenges that most CMOs talk about in one way or another when they talk about AI. I think the first is around data integrity. So it's like anything else here, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And, you know, artificial intelligence is dependent upon a massive, massive amount of data, clearly. And its ability to obviously process it right. So there's issues on 2 fronts. One is, can you trust the data that AI is actually using? And then beyond that, can you trust the underlying algorithms that are essentially informing the artificial intelligence? Because sometimes there can be either intended or unintended systemic biases, right? So it's all of that is kind of under this broader umbrella of data integrity. Either it's the integrity itself or the algorithms that are informing the AI-inspired recommendations. And I put that into the data integrity. Another, which I think
Really quick on that, do you see that they're developing AI tools internally to be able to manage the integrity in a more proactive way? Or are they using outsourced tools that they feel more confident in regarding that? Or both?
I would say it's actually the opposite. I think the ones that I spoke with who are more concerned about data integrity and more concerned about systemic biases and algorithms and so forth, those are the ones who are bringing it in-house. They're not trusting the off-the-shelf solutions. They're saying, you know what, this is really critical, stakes are high, it's a bigger commitment and higher risk, but we're going to actually bring that in-house.
Good. That's great. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that. That's an important consideration. And then I interrupted you as you were going into the second element there.
Oh, sure. No worries. So the second, I think, is more specific to generative AI, ChatGPT, for example, and that is copyright and IP ownership. A lot of concern with the marketers I spoke to about that. So who owns what's being put out there? And, how do you deal with copyright issues and so forth? There's a lot of question marks around that, right? I think this is a huge gray area right now. And then the final, which I think is really important to this conversation, is around and I think you started to go there earlier when you talked about the CSAMS, that's around brand fit and authenticity. And that's just, to what extent can artificial intelligence, whether it's generative AI or other, really represent your brand in the way that's actually authentic to its positioning, and to the extent that we as human beings and brand managers can. There's a lot of tools in place, filters, right, that kind of are trying to ensure brand fit and authenticity, but I would argue that none can do it as well as, a very, very well-trained, competent brand manager.
I mean, like Photoshop is one thing, right? But actually having an image created through generative AI that shows an individual wearing your product is a completely different approach. And a lot of brands are coming out and saying that we don't feel that's authentic. We're not going to do it. I mean, Dove is an example of that they've said our models are human and only human.
Yeah. Yeah. I think brands and even the CMOs that I spoke with have different perspectives on that. Some feel it would be just disingenuous. Others feel like, again, it's just the way, marketing and brand building is done today. But regardless of whether you feel, how you feel about it morally or ethically, I think what is critical is that if you are going to use it, again, it needs to be true and authentic to you, right? And it needs to be reflective of your brand positioning. Because if not, first of all, consumers will sniff that out, right? They'll sniff out disingenuous content in a heartbeat. But also, it will, perhaps more importantly, it will begin to denigrate your brand positioning. Well, it's just like anything else. When you execute or you activate in a way that's even slightly off brand, over time, your brand equity begins to disintegrate.
Yeah. I'm interested if any of the CMOs that you interviewed brought up how they felt tech and in particular AI would change their roles in the future.
Yes, talked a lot about that, actually, probably with almost everyone that we spoke to AI about. And what I would say is, and I found this really encouraging, is that to a person, every single CMO I spoke with about AI had a positive outlook toward it.
Good.
It wasn't fear mongering. It wasn't, oh my gosh, it's the end of humanity. It certainly wasn't the end of creativity. Yes, some did talk about, job roles may change, certain functions or sub functions might entirely go away. And that's happened in the past with technology, right? But to a person, all the CMOs talked about this being a game-changing technology for their role. And what I mean by that is they talked about how, and this was particularly evident in B2B spaces where marketing isn't necessarily king or queen. AI has the ability to elevate the stature and role of the marketer within the C-suite and across the organization, increasing their profile, increasing their level of influence. Because what do they own? They own the customer, right? And consumer understanding and consumer behavior, more so than any other function. And AI is improving their ability to really master those topics. And when you do that, the CMOs were saying, all of a sudden you increase your relevance in the C-suite. You're not just talking about activation, you're talking about fundamental business strategy and growth strategy and helping to contribute to the growth agenda. So they really do see if the marketing function or even the CMO in particular is not at the forefront of the organization, they feel that AI can help take steps to do that.
Yeah, and it absolutely should. We've just got a couple more minutes. This has been such an interesting discussion today and just so many tidbits of wisdom. It's incredible. What advice or what is the best way for a brand to start today if they really are starting from ground zero? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, great question. A few things. One is, it's really interesting, Lori, when I was reaching out to the CMOs to speak with them, And I brought up in particular these emerging technologies as topics in the book. They're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about that. We're not really doing a lot. We're not on the forefront. And then I push back and say, oh, okay, fair, but just tell me what you are doing. And then they would say, well, we're doing this and we're doing that. I'm like, okay, that's a lot. It's a lot more than you think. And I think we should talk about it. And what that told me is that I think we're at a point in time where everyone has this sense or this fear that they're not really, that they're not yet embracing it, that they might even be behind the curve on it. And you're not. Again, I talked to mostly Fortune 500 CMOs. 17 of them are on Fortune's 50 most influential CMOs in the world. And they're a little self-conscious about, well, I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about this. So don't feel like you're behind yet.
Yeah.
However, they all did say, if we don't embrace this now and start at least tinkering with these technologies, we will quickly fall behind. And I think that we are in a moment in time right now where there is this window of opportunity to kind of get on the bandwagon and to learn, test and learn, experiment, tinker, start on a small scale. These CMOs are doing a lot of what I'm talking about. AI, they're starting with ChatGPT and off-the-shelf Gen AI solutions, right? They're just starting there and figuring out what they have before they are all in building proprietary systems in-house. Same with the metaverse. They're experimenting with what they call 2.5, Web 2.5, right? It's not the full-blown Oculus metaverse, but it's the non-3D metaverse, right? They're getting involved. They're not standing on the sidelines watching, waiting for it all to unfold. They're testing and learning and experimenting. And as they achieve the wins, they're gradually expanding. So I think that's some of the advice I would give to start small, use pilots, agile pods, if you will, that don't require as much investment and time and don't entail as much risk as just jumping in headfirst.
Mitch, so many great insights there. We have found that a lot of brands have been using AI for 5, 6, 7 years, and they just don't know it because it just goes to a bucket of software, right? And they just have no idea. So take a look at what you already are doing. Give yourself a pat on the back for that, even if you didn't know it, and then move forward.
Exactly.
Oh, I tell you, the book is The Future Ready Brand. Where can people get it?
So you can learn more about the book in a couple different ways. One is my consulting firm. So again, we're FullSurge, FullSurge.com. You go on there, there's information about the books. And there's also information about it on basically anywhere where you would buy business books, certainly anywhere online, such as Barnes & Noble and Amazon. It's available there. And it's also available at some brick and mortar as well. But certainly online is probably the easiest way to get it.
Well, that's great, Mitch. Thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can email me at Lori@StrategyCast.com. And don't forget to sign up for the StrategyCast newsletter there as well. Thank you so much, Mitch. It's been an absolute pleasure learning more about what really makes that mind tick. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Enjoyed the conversation.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.